Good morning, folks, and here's a wonderful little video from Netflix Film Club by Lilly Wachowski saying why The Matrix is a trans story, which it isn't, but again, a creator or anyone can interpret any piece of media any way they want. And that's the thing. You can do this with anything. That doesn't mean that's what's actually there, but if you're saying it's a trans story, what kind of trans story? Because I remember watching The Matrix. I don't recall seeing anything to do with transgenderism. There might have been some character or characters that were androgynous to a degree. Here's a character right there. So this is not impossible, but the whole film is obviously not a transgender story, nor is it a transgender allegory. The only allegories I got, and there are three I could count, and that was on initial viewing, was the first one is Neo is Jesus. He's a Jesus-like character. He's coming in, he's going to save everyone. You could say he's a Moses character as well, same idea. He comes in, he presses all the buttons, he has full access, and he can do things that no one else can do. The other two are obvious to me because this is what I studied in school. So Plato, the allegory of the cave, and Descartes' evil genius. And those are just basic stuff. I'm not a philosophy major. I just took a few courses here and there at university. But even I knew the difference. Not so much on the transgender allegory. Didn't really get that at all. So I don't know what Lilly is talking about. And of course, Lilly used to be Andy. Really unsure of where this is coming from. When you talk about transformation, specifically in the world of science fiction, which is just about imagination and world building and the idea of seemingly impossible becoming possible, I think that's why it speaks to them so much. That's a fine definition of science fiction. There's all kinds. Science fiction is essentially futuristic ideas or technology, putting people in alien scenarios that they would not have gotten if they were in another genre or doing something else. So that's why Star Trek is so resonant, because it's essentially human condition in an alien futuristic world, where you might have literal aliens or you might have literal humans, but there's still some human element to something alien that people don't know of or haven't thought of before. And it's like, wow, and what if a creature could do that? Or what if this scenario happened? What if technology like this existed? It makes your mind go, wow. That's why people love writing fantasy and love writing science fiction. You're allowed to go wherever you like, give it some grounding, and go crazy with it, and hopefully write a good story. The problem is, if people start reading into it and say, oh, this is really an allegory about transhumanism, you're like, well, no, it's kind of not. It's, yes, there are some elements of cybernetics and this and that, but that's not what it is. It's a very clear allegory of the allegory of the cave, the evil genius, etc. But transgenderism, okay, that's fine. I'm glad it has gotten out that, that was the original intention, but the world wasn't quite ready. The corporate world wasn't ready for a transgender story about an allegory of the cave of being all trapped in a machine. So you're saying the corporate world wasn't ready for it, but I'm glad people are interpreting it that way. So you're saying it's not actually a transgender movie? Like, what are you saying? Was it or wasn't it a transgender movie? When you make movies and it's this public art form, yes, when you make art, it becomes public. That's true. I think any kind of art that you put into the universe, there's a letting go process. Yes. It doesn't matter what you think of it. It doesn't matter that you made it. Once it's out there, it's up to the public to interpret. There's going to be lots of hacks, including the creators of the art, who will say it's this or that. When you take an objective approach, when you actually look at the thing for what it is, not for what you think it is, then you get a clearer understanding of what art is, what the object is. Then you can then make proper experiences and analysis and interpretations. Basic stuff. Because entering the public dialogue, yes, art exists for the public. It's no longer the creator. The Matrix stuff was all about the desire for transformation, but it was all coming from a closeted point of view. What does that even mean? Are you telling me that Neo was closeted, that he was holding on to the Matrix world, and then he realized he has to leave? Sure, that's a typical hero's journey. You're in the world of normalcy, and then you let go and you go into the world of becoming. Another Plato allegory, if you will. And so we had the character of Switch, who was like a character who would be a man in the real world, and then a woman in the Matrix. Both were where, I don't even remember this character. Were they? I know they wore a white suit. That was their thing. But that's about it. There wasn't that much to the side character. And that's fine. You could do that with side characters, but that's it. That's just a little touch. It's not the actual allegory or the actual story of what it's about. I don't know how present my transness was in the background of my brain as we were writing it, but it all came from the same sort of fire that I'm talking about. I don't really care what was going through a creator's mind or what was motivating them to make whatever. And we can talk about the other two movies as Matrix films. They were part of the series, but they were just mediocre at best. And they were actually one movie, and they filmed it and wrote it improperly, so they cut it in two because it was too long. And it's just, you can just tell how poorly designed those films were. We really only talk about the first Matrix film as being this beautiful work of art. It has lots of storytelling elements that work and are properly telling a story. It's clear and understood. Because trans people exist in this, especially for me and Lana, we were existing in this space where the words didn't exist. The words didn't exist. You're a writer, you're a creator. What do you mean the words didn't exist? Did you have to learn some words to write? And we're always living in a world of imagination. It's why I gravitate towards science fiction and fantasy. Yep. And played D&D. Yep. Everyone loves fantasy, little children to adults. We're always going to love exploring the unknown in our minds. It was all about creating worlds, and so I think it freed us as filmmakers because we were able to imagine stuff at that time that you didn't necessarily see on screen. That's fine. That's totally cool. Or even the idea of how we can exist in as many genres as possible. That's a bit pushing it. I don't think you want to do that with your stories. You don't want to start smashing genres together and hope for the best. You want to know how to tell a story well, and then if you're really ambitious, tell another story well that might be in another genre. That's really hard. One of the things we really enjoyed doing was the sort of genre bending, where you would have stuff that felt like kung fu and anime and westerns. Yeah, I admit the Animatrix, which was a combination of media and genre and put together in the world of the Matrix, was fantastic. It was 2D animation, it was 3D, it was all sorts of things. It was beautiful stuff. We always loved the scene that Ned Beatty would do this in the movie network, yada yada, fine. I think our transness and queerness, we were always trying to incorporate as many things as possible. Yeah, I don't care. You do whatever you want there, Lily. But trying to tell us that this is what the film was about is just silly. That's not part of the movie. It's just not in there. I don't know how you could actually have that sort of mentality and say, oh yeah, it's really about Neo discovering he's not really a man. It's like, no. That's silly. It's like, I'm having all these emotions. Like, that's great. I'm glad you had emotions when you wrote the script. That's a good thing. Do whatever you got to do to write that script. I think that's a fine, dandy thing. So this is one of these things that I also don't like. I don't know why these people gravitate to these feelings or philosophies. Born out of anger and a lot of rage, and it's rage at capitalism and corporatized structure and forms of oppression. I don't really get that too much. I mean, yes, there is this scene where we see Neo or Mr. Anderson go to work, and it's sort of this green, dull, drab environment. It's only there for a scene for him to get excited and start talking on the phone and run away from a bunch of Agent Smiths getting captured. That's it. It's not really about capitalism, guys. The film is not about capitalism either. So no, it's not about transgenderism. It's not about the oppression of corporatized structure. Neo was always doing things on the side, and that was how he got into trouble, and all this other nonsense. That's a very short part of the film. Barely mentions that at all. In fact, if you want to make the argument, you could say it stems from capitalism, because that's actually like the Neo going to work is actually a thing in the movie, as opposed to transgenderism. That would be a better argument, just because there's more evidence. But my goodness, stop listening to creators. Stop listening to people who are interpreting things as not being what they are. It's just silly, and it's not worth your time. Anyway, thanks for listening, folks. Hope you're having a great day. Take it easy.